Speak. Prosody rate equals 90%. Imagine. A queen, forced to give birth in public in Versailles. Humiliation or political strategy? Discover the truth after this shocking historical event. Subscribe and activate the bell so as not to miss anything. Imagine Versailles. A sumptuous palace, but also a scenario of intrigues and secrets. There, between opulence and power, an event was created that would forever mark the history of France. The childbirth of a queen at it was not any delivery, but a public act, carefully orchestrated humiliation that will leave you breathless. Think about the pressure, the tension, the weight of the crown on his shoulders while confronting the judging gaze of the entire court. The mystery wraps this event. Why was he forced to give birth in public? What hidden interests moved after this cruel decision? The answer is not simple, and I assure you that it will surprise you. Through this video, we are going to unravel the pieces of this historical puzzle, exploring the political motivations and consequences of this birth that changed forever the course of the French monarchy. Prepare to discover a story full of secrets. This was not just a birth. It was a demonstration of power, a public exhibition of vulnerability, and a calculated political strategy. Think about the weight of tradition, the pressure of the court, and the expectations of an entire nation on the shoulders of this queen. His suffering became a show, a reminder of the absolute power of the monarchy, but also a demonstration of its fragility. What secrets are hidden after this shocking event? Think of the overflowing luxury of Versailles. Gold, tapestries, gigantic candlesticks, an ostentation of wealth that eclipsed any other European palace. But behind that golden facade, a network of palatial intrigues was hidden. Each nobleman competed for the real favor, weaving alliances and plotting conspiracies to ascend in the hierarchy, even at the expense of their own relatives. The power in the French court of the 17th century concentrated in the hands of the king, of course, but also in those of his ministers, favorites, and, above all, in the queen. The women of royalty had a key role in politics, influencing decisions that affected the entire nation. His alliances and enmity determined the rise or fall of many nobles. But that influence was not exempt from dangers. The struggle for power was constant and ruthless. The rivalries between noble families, the conspiracies to overthrow the king or to get a more flattering position in court, were current currency. Appearances cheated. After smiles and courtly greetings, deep ambitions, betrayals, and hatreds were hidden. Life in court was a dangerous game, where a bad play could have devastating consequences. But behind that blinding brightness, the complexities of the French court were hidden. Imagine Maria Antonietta, a very young Austrian queen, arriving in Versailles with only 14 years. He found himself in a world of palatial intrigues, of powerful adults who played a game that she still did not understand. The weight of a crown on his inexperienced shoulders, the pressure of a nation on his fragile backs. Do you imagine fear, loneliness, the immense pressure of being the Queen of France? Surrounded by courtiers who were looking for their favor, palatial intrigues that I did not understand, and the weight of the expectation of a people that saw it as an almost divine figure. Suddenly, all that opulence became a golden cage, a luxury prison. At that early age, I had to learn to navigate a sea of protocols, ancestral customs, and social expectations that for you, today, would be almost incomprehensible. That he had to learn to be queen, to be a wife, to be a mother, all at the same time, without the guidance of anyone who really understood her. It was an arranged marriage, a political pact between France and Austria. You, very young, were a key piece in that power game. You married with Louis XVI, a king with the weight of a crown and the expectations of a nation on his shoulders. I imagine the pressure, the weight of the responsibility that fell on you. A girl turned into queen overnight. Marriage, far from being a fairy tale, became a golden cage. Versailles, with his opulence and splendor, was also a scenario of intrigues, where every movement, each word, was under the scrutiny of the court. Your actions, even your emotions, were subject to the expectations of international politics. The pressure to produce an heir was immense. The legitimacy of the French monarchy depended, to a large extent, on your ability to give birth to a prince. That weight, that constant expectation, became an almost unbearable load, a shadow that was projected on your daily life, on your stolen youth. Prosody, speak. Speak, the prosody rate equals 90%, but the marriage contract was not just a union of kingdoms, it was a promise of offspring. The pressure for an heir was immense, a burden that felt in every whore of the court. You, just a girl, became the center of all the hopes and fears of France. Every month, every delay, became a thorn stuck in the heart of the monarchy. The court watched you with magnifying glass. Every movement of your analyzed, interpreted, commented. Rumors spread like a gunpowder, amplifying your fears and feeding the anxiety of the royal family. The crown's weight was not only a jewel, but an invisible yoke that oppressed you day after day. The pressure not only came from the court but also from your own family. Austria expected an heir, a symbol of his influence in France. The expectation was unbearable, a Damocles sword on your head. Every day that passed without a successful pregnancy, tension and scrutiny increased. Just married, you were in a cold and distant marriage. The king, a man accustomed to power and frivolity, saw you more as a piece in his political game than as a wife. His attentions were scarce, his short and formal conversations. The loneliness in the vast palace of Versailles was palpable, a silence that resonated stronger than any murmur of the court. The nights in your royal bed were a reflection of the coldness of their treatment. The king slept in his own room, separating their lives even in the most intimate field. There was no passion or affection, only the obligation to fulfill the wishes of the court, an heir to the throne. The pressure was constant, a dark shadow that lengthened about each of your days. The court watched, kicked, and judged you. Every look, every whisper, was a stab in your heart. You felt isolated, a foreigner in a strange land, surrounded by luxury but deprived of human warmth. Marriage was not a union of love, but a cold political alliance, a golden cage where loneliness was your only companion. Your marriage, already icy, was wrapped in a maelstrom of whispers and speculation. The court of Versailles, an intrigue's hotbed, delighted with the lack of an heir. Every month that passed without a visible pregnancy became a new chapter of gossip and conjectures. Fed by the cold indifference of the king and your own inexperience in the complex machinery of real power, you felt the pressure of society, a heavy layer that oppressed you. Each inquisitive look reminded you of your perceived failure. The company ladies, with their hypocritical smiles and their sibilant comments, watched you with a mixture of envy and contempt. Whispers on your supposed infertility, about possible secret lovers, about your lack of grace and real charm. They persecuted you as a constant shadow. You felt his penetrating gaze, judging you, dissecting each of your movements, every word you pronounced. The pressure not only came from the court, but also from the royal family itself. The need for a legitimate heir was a matter of state, and your inability to fulfill that duty was perceived as a threat to the future of France. Each family reunion became a reminder of your deficiencies, of your failure in the role that had been assigned to you. You felt trapped in a network of expectations and prejudices, without escape. And then pregnancy came, an event that, far from being an intimate moment, became a public show. Each stage of your gestation was observed, analyzed, and controlled by the court. You were not only you who took a new life, but you carried the future of the dynasty, the weight of a nation on your shoulders. Your body became a political battlefield. Each movement, each change in your state of health, was registered and reported with implacable precision. The company ladies, with a mixture of curiosity and obligation, constantly monitored you, whispering between them while you discussed yourself between fatigue and tension. The royal doctors, with their bloody and their remedies of doubtful efficiency, constantly intervened, submitting to a strict regime and invasive treatments under the watchful eye of the court. Your privacy was completely dissolved. Each sigh, every complaint, became food for rumors and palatial conspiracies. It wasn't just your body that was under scrutiny. Every detail of childbirth was planned thoroughly. A special room in Versailles was prepared, a large and opulent room, but also functional. A medical team was selected, the best of the time, although their methods were far from what we know today. Invitations were sent to the most important nobles, an event that, despite the intimate, was public. Prosody. Speak. Speak. Prosody rate equals 90%. The sheets were chosen. The cushions, each element should be in their exact place. Potions and remedies were prepared, some of them strange to our eyes, based on the medical knowledge of the time. The atmosphere was a mixture of expectation and nervousness, with the entire court waiting, anxious to witness the event. Even furniture and decoration should reflect the importance of the event. Imagine. You, at the center of all that frenzy, without privacy, completely exposed. The pressure should be immense, the expectation, overwhelming. You prepared a special attire for childbirth, a sober but elegant dress, which reflected both the solemnity of the moment and your position. Every detail, every movement, was being observed and registered for posterity. And you, in the epicenter of everything, waiting for the most important moment of your life. But opulence hid an uncomfortable truth. You were about to give birth to a select audience. The news of your imminent childbirth had extended like the gunpowder by the court. The room, although prepared for royalty, became a scenario for an involuntary show. The arrival of the spectators began subtly, with a murmur that was intensifying. Important court characters, duchesses with their impressive dresses, ministers with their impassive faces, all settled in their assigned, expectant places. The air was loaded with a mixture of tension and expectation. Each whisper, each movement, was extended in the silent anticipation of the event. You, at the center of everything, you were aware of each look, of each silent judgment. The murmur became a constant buzz. The room, formerly imposing and silent, now vibrated with the contained energy of an expectant crowd, anxious to witness the birth. That it was no longer just your body that was under scrutiny. Each contraction, each groan, would become part of this public show, a demonstration of the fragility and power of royalty, simultaneously. The room was immense, an opulent space prepared for the event, but not for you. Gridable crystals, silk tapestries with mythological scenes, and a dense air of expectation surrounded you. Nobility, company ladies, doctors and midwives, everyone watched with a mixture of curiosity and morbid. Your fight against pain. It was a theatrical scenario, where your suffering was the main show, and you, the actress, forced to play a role you had not chosen. Each breathing, each groan, each contraction was amplified by the expectant silence. You felt the heavy looks about you, judging you, analyzing every detail of your most intimate experience. Privacy, that basic right, had been taken away from you. They made you a show to satisfy the curiosity of an avid cut of drama. The air became dense, heavy as the weight of the tradition that oppressed you. You weren't just a queen, you were a body, a container, exposed to everyone's sight. The luxury that surrounded you was transformed into a golden cage, a humiliation scenario. The intimacy of childbirth, such a vulnerable and personal moment, became a public act, a cold and impersonal ritual. Versailles' opulence could not hide the cruelty of the situation. And there they were, imposing figures with their dark silk clothes and their serious faces, the real doctors. They observed every movement of yours, each contraction, every whisper. His instruments, brilliant in the light of the candles, seemed threatening. They were not just doctors. They were judges of your ability to give birth to an heir. His presence overwhelmed you. His absolute control over the process terrified you. His expert hands, although with fine leather gloves, approached you with a coldness that froze you to the bones. Each palpation, each exam, was an invasion of your intimacy, an added humiliation to the already brutal experience of childbirth. You, a queen, reduced to a vulnerable body under its relentless scrutiny.
Sentía sus miradas pesadas sobre ti, juzgándote, evaluándote, no solo como una mujer que estaba dando a luz, sino como una reina, como la garante de la continuidad de la dinastía. Su silencio era más opresivo que cualquier grito de dolor, su control, una cadena invisible que te aprisionaba aún más en esa sala opulenta pero despiadada. Y tú, en medio de ese dolor insoportable, solo podías sentir la presión de las miradas. Miles de ojos, ocultos tras sedas y encajes, te observaban. Los miembros de la corte, con sus ropas suntuosas y sus rostros impasibles, formaban un círculo silencioso, expectante. Algunos susurraban entre ellos, otros mantenían la compostura con una rigidez casi inhumana. La curiosidad y el morbo se mezclaban en el aire, denso y cargado de tensión. /prosody /speak. Speak prosody rate igual a 90%, más allá de la nobleza. Se agolpaba la multitud. Sirvientes, guardias, y hasta algunos curiosos que habían logrado colarse, se asomaban por las puertas y ventanas intentando ver algo, aunque solo fueran retazos de la escena. Sus rostros, una mezcla de asombro, miedo y fascinación, reflejaban la rareza del evento. El silencio era casi absoluto, roto solo por tus jadeos y los susurros nerviosos de la multitud. Imagino que para ti, cada contracción era una eternidad, amplificada por la presencia de esa multitud silenciosa. Cada quejido, cada movimiento, era observado, juzgado, analizado. Era como si estuvieras expuesta en un escenario, sin poder escapar de las miradas implacables de todos aquellos que te rodeaban. Era una humillación pública, un espectáculo cruel del que eras la protagonista involuntaria. Y allí estabas, expuesta, vulnerable. La nobleza, con sus rostros impasibles pero curiosos, se apretujaba para observar cada contracción, cada gemido. El aire, denso con el perfume de las damas y el sudor de la angustia, apenas te permitía respirar. Tú, la reina, convertida en un espectáculo público, en una pieza de teatro donde el dolor era el único argumento. Cada grito tuyo era un eco en la sala, amplificado por el silencio expectante. Los susurros, las miradas furtivas, los comentarios en voz baja, todo se mezclaba en un torbellino de humillación que te envolvía. No eras una mujer, ni siquiera una reina. Eras un cuerpo, una función biológica expuesta a la fría mirada de la corte. Imagino que el dolor físico era solo una parte de tu sufrimiento. La invasión de tu intimidad, la exposición de tu vulnerabilidad más profunda, eso era lo que te destrozaba. Era una humillación calculada, un acto de poder que te reducía a tu condición de mujer, de madre, despojándote de tu corona en el momento más vulnerable de tu vida. El dolor se intensificó, una ola inmensa que te dejó sin aliento. Sentías la presión, la vida luchando por salir. Un grito desgarrador, tuyo, resonó en la sala, rompiendo el silencio expectante. Las damas se estremecieron, algunos caballeros apartaron la mirada, pero la mayoría, fascinada, seguía observando. El momento era crucial, no solo para ti, sino para toda Francia. Un heredero, una esperanza, dependía de este instante. Un llanto agudo, débil al principio, luego más fuerte, llenó la sala. Un nuevo ser, pequeño y frágil, había llegado al mundo. Un momento de silencio, luego un susurro colectivo de alivio y expectación. La mirada de la multitud se dirigió al recién nacido, una pequeña vida que cargaba sobre sus hombros el peso de una nación. Tú, exhausta, pero con un extraño sentimiento de triunfo, sentías tu cuerpo temblar. Todo había pasado. El llanto del bebé se convirtió en un símbolo, un grito de esperanza para un reino incierto. Su llegada marcaba el inicio de una nueva era, un futuro que ahora dependía de su supervivencia y su reinado futuro. La tensión se disipó, pero la escena grabada en la memoria de todos sería para siempre un recordatorio de la brutalidad y la expectación que rodeaban a la realeza. Tú, la reina, habías sobrevivido. Francia tenía un heredero. Un pequeño gemido, débil pero perceptible, te llegó a través del torbellino de dolor. Un nuevo ser, un heredero, una promesa. Sus primeros llantos, pequeños sollozos, rompieron la tensión sofocante de la sala. Era un niño, un príncipe, un símbolo de la continuidad de la dinastía, una esperanza para el reino. Su llegada representaba la supervivencia de la línea real, la perpetuación del poder, la promesa de un futuro seguro para la corona. En ese instante, el dolor físico se desvaneció, eclipsado por la inmensa ola de alivio y de una alegría profunda, casi indescriptible. Observabas a tu hijo, un ser diminuto y frágil, pero portador de un peso enorme, la esperanza de una nación. Era el futuro, encarnado en ese pequeño cuerpo, y por un instante, olvidaste el sufrimiento, abrazada por la emoción de la maternidad y el alivio de la supervivencia.
His little body, a symbol of the continuity of the dynasty, represented the victory over death, the promise of a stable and prosperous reign. He was more than a child. It was the incarnation of real power, the future heir to the throne, the guarantee of political stability for France and that little being. The hope of an entire kingdom was concentrated. The physical pain faded slowly, leaving behind a bleak vacuum, a void that was not only that of the force that had abandoned you, but that of a deep, lacerating loneliness. The child's groan, formerly a lighthouse in the storm, now resonated as a distant echo, a reminder of the humiliation you just suffered. Your gaze, lost in the distance, was reflected in the impassive faces of those around you, mute witnesses of your vulnerability. Prosody, speak. Speak, prosody rate equals 90%. The tears, which until then had been contained by a superhuman will, began to sprout silently. They were not tears of physical pain, although it still throbbed in your body. They were tears of humiliation, of indignity, of a deep wound to your real pride. The weight of the crown, which had always been a symbol of power, now felt like an unbearable load, a constant reminder of your defeat. A chill ran off your back. It was not the cold of the icy air of Versailles, but the penetrating cold of shame. The image of your exposed, vulnerable body, under the judge of the court, was recorded by fire in your memory. That image, that lacerating memory, would become an invisible scar, but painfully present, which would accompany you forever. The silence that followed your suffering was even more cruel. You observed the faces of the court, silk and lace masks that hid their true thoughts. Some, with a fake compassion, whispered hypocritical sentences. Others, however, did not hide their satisfaction. Their eyes shone with a cold malice, the tension, the expectation. A silent storm about to explode was palpable. You felt their eyes like knives, each stabbed to your honor and your position. You said then that your pain was not just physical. It was a tool, a weapon used against you. Your weakness, your vulnerability, had become a show for the enjoyment of those who conspired against you. Each sigh, each gesture of pain, was analyzed, interpreted, twisted to serve their ambitions. They were experts in manipulation, in turning your suffering into an instrument of power. Public humiliation was not just cruelty. It was a political strategy calculated to undermine your authority and strengthen the position of your enemies. Each look, every comment, every whisper was a piece in a mortal chess game, where you were the sacrificed piece. And the worst thing was that you knew it. Understanding invaded you like an ice wave, paralyzing you with a more deep terror than physical pain. The murmur became a torrent. Your humiliation, exposed to the court, became the topic of main conversation. The whispers, initially cautious, became increasingly bold, crossing the walls of the palace and reaching the ears of the town. The reputation of the royal family, already weakened by previous scandals, was made Giron's. Your suffering became a weapon, used by your enemies to undermine the king's power. Suddenly, you were the center of an unprecedented scandal. Anonymous letters, full of insults and slander, flooded the court. Even those who had previously shown you a false compassion rushed to distance themselves, fearing the spread of your misfortune. The nobility, always eager for power, saw in your humiliation an opportunity to climb positions. You became a pawn in its intrigue games. The king, instead of protecting you, was forced to take measures to control the situation. The court's pressure, the fear of a popular revolt, and the threat of a coup d'état forced him to make difficult decisions that directly affected you. Your public humiliation had not only marked you, he had destabilized the entire kingdom, becoming a crack on the power facade of the French monarchy. Your actions, previously admired, were now seen with a mixture of pity and contempt. The image of the powerful queen, the imposing sovereign, had broken. From one day to another, the court judged you with a new perspective, cold and calculator, analyzing each gesture, every word, looking for cracks in your armor. The nobility, formerly so willing to flatter you, now watched you with an icy distance. The admiration looks had been transformed into whispers and whispers, in inquisitive looks that sought to confirm the rumors that already circulated. Your reputation, before impeccable, was stained, irremediably damaged. Even the king, your husband, although he did not openly show you his rejection, looked at you with a new coldness. The trust they shared before seemed to have evaporated, replaced by an uncomfortable distance. A tense silence that spoke volumes. Your position, your power, was threatened by the shadow of that event. The French court, before a hotbed of intrigues and rivalries, was now divided even more. Your enemies, who previously hid after hypocritical smiles, now showed themselves openly. The public humiliation that you had suffered had weakened your position irremediably, and many of your allies began to doubt your ability to govern. The ministers, formerly submissive, began to question your decisions and conspire against you. The nobility, always eager for power, saw in your weakness the opportunity to strengthen their own positions. The alliances that you had built with so much effort were broken as glass, exposing a network of betrayals and ambitions. Prosody is speak. Speak, prosody rate equals 90%. Your influence on politics was drastically reduced. Important decisions no longer depend on your approval, and your advice were easily ignored or discarded. The court, before under your control, had become a battlefield where your enemies fought for power, while you, the queen, were a mere spectator of your own decline. That public ceremony, dear, was not a simple birth. That it was a carefully orchestrated humiliation ritual. Imagine the crowded room, the expectant crowd observing each contraction, every shout of pain. Each gesture, amplified by the expectant silence, became a symbol, one more piece in the cruel game of power that was developed. The ostensible luxury that surrounded you, the golden tapestry, the candles illuminating the impassive faces of the nobility, were nothing more than a grotesque mockery. Every detail, from the arrangement of the candles to the choice of the tissues, was calculated to underline your vulnerability, to remind you and remind the entire kingdom of your diminished position. Your body, exposed to the public gaze, became a symbol of your weakened power. The delivery, a normally intimate and private act, became a public show, a demonstration of the fragility of the monarchy before your enemies. The symbolism was brutally clear. Your pain was his triumph. Think about the impact of that experience, the violation of your deepest intimacy exposed to hundreds of eyes. Imagine shame, physical pain mixed with public humiliation. Your body, your most vulnerable moment, turned into a show for the court. The feeling of helplessness, that they have stolen something unrecoverable. That exposed vulnerability marked your life forever. You couldn't feel safe, even in your own body. Trust in yourself, in your dignity as queen, was irremediably damaged. Intimacy, that sacred space, had become a public battlefield. Relationships with your husband, with your cut, with all those around you, changed forever. The look of others, before respectful, was now impregnated with a mixture of morbid curiosity and condescending compassion. That experience marked you on fire, leaving an invisible but deep scar in your soul. Your body, already vulnerable, became a show. The court, the nobility, even the townspeople crowded to witness the event. That it was not an act of birth, but an act of control. A brutal reminder of your position, a demonstration of power for the king and his court, who appropriated the most sacred intimacy. Each groan, each contraction, was a testimony of your fragility exposed to everyone's judging gaze. The absence of privacy was a tool of oppression, a clear message. Even at the most vulnerable moment, your body, your pain, did not belong to you. Public delivery was not just a humiliation, it was a demonstration of power. The king, observing from his privileged place, affirmed his domain, not only about you, but above all the kingdom. Your suffering became a lesson for all. Sovereignty was absolute, even about life itself. A childbirth in these conditions was a Russian roulette. Your body, already weakened by the effort, faced the possibility of hemorrhages, infections, or even death. Imagine pain, vulnerability, multiplied by the pressure of an expectant crowd that observed each contraction, each drop of sweat. The lack of hygiene was a lethal factor. At that time, sepsis was a constant threat, and infections could spread rapidly. The tools used to attend childbirth, surely without due sterilization, increased considerably the risk of serious complications. You, in the midst of all that bustle, were completely at the mercy of luck and skill, or the lack of it, of the doctors of the court. In addition to the risk of death for you, there was the possibility that the baby did not survive. Infant mortality was very high, and complications during childbirth contributed to it significantly. Every minute, every contraction was a struggle for life, both for you and your child. The silence of anguish in the face of the possibility of irreparable loss. But the agony does not end there. Your newborn, fruit of so much suffering, is immediately examined. Expert fingers, probably those of the midwife or one of the women of the court, feel their little body, looking for signs of life, health. A weak crying, a movement, an irregular breathing. Every detail matters. It is an indication of survival in a world where infant mortality was very high. The weight of the baby, its coloration, the strength of its beats. Everything is written, meticulously. His survival, for the moment, is uncertain. Prosody, speak. Speak, Prosody rate equals 90%. If the baby survives the first hours, the care continues. Far from the comfort and hygiene that we know today, the newborn is wrapped in thick fabrics, possibly even in linen diapers, and placed in a small Moses, or perhaps directly in his mother's bed. Breast milk, if possible, will be your first food. But food, hygiene, and protection of the child will depend largely on their mother's health and ability to take care of it. Remember that you are in Versailles, where survival is a matter of privilege. In that context, baby survival is a constant fight against infections. The lack of hygiene, overcrowding, and precariousness of medical care of the time means that a simple infection could be deadly. A common cold, a poorly cured wound, or even a simple diarrhea could be fatal to the little one. The attention you receive, access to the best attention available at that time, will make the difference between life and death. The baby's fate, once again, is in the hands of chance and access to courts, resources. But those fingers, those eyes, not only evaluated the baby's health. A narrative was being built, a carefully orchestrated image for public consumption. The scene, although brutal for you, became a propaganda show. Each gesture, each look, was destined to project an image of real strength, of an unwavering monarchy, even in the face of pain. Remember that every detail was controlled, each assistant a piece in this complex gear of real propaganda. The midwife, with its precise movements, not only attended to the newborn, but also acted as a central figure in this carefully planned staging to demonstrate the Queen's ability to fulfill their duty, even in the most adverse circumstances. Rumors, speculation, everything was meticulously controlled. The information that came out of Versailles was carefully filtered, molded to present an image of real fertility and dynastic stability, hiding the truth of the suffering you were suffering. The public image was much more important than your personal experience. A narrative was built, yes, but what did people really think? Imagine the murmur in the streets of Versailles, the speculation in the halls of the nobility, the whispered conversations between serviles. The carefully orchestrated image of the Queen giving up in public, was it received with admiration or with a repulsion chill? For many, it was a public humiliation, a violation of real intimacy. For others, a demonstration of strength, connection with the people. But even those who applaud the exhibition did not feel a minimum of discomfort in the face of the crudeness of the scene. The line between the show and the outrage was diffuse, and public opinion fractured. Think about the impact on the court, on the royal family itself. The Queen's image suffering, exposed to everyone's gaze, how did he affect their relationships? Was the link with the people strengthened, or was a major gap, a crack in trust? The real propaganda, in its attempt to control the narrative, perhaps only managed to deepen confusion and speculation. But was this public delivery something unique in the history of the French monarchy? The truth is, not many queens and princesses had given birth to the court, although with different degrees of privacy. Think of the elaborate ceremonies, the witnesses of the nobility, the tense and expectant environment. A simple tradition or a way of controlling the real lineage. In that context, our Queen's childbirth, although humiliating, was not totally exceptional. However, there were important differences. While some monarchs enjoyed a more intimate environment with a lower number of spectators, our Queen was denied that intimacy. The public exposure was deliberate, an act of calculated humiliation. And there is the key. The intention, the underlying political message, differentiated his experience from previous real births. On other occasions, real birth was a celebration event, a sample of power and fertility. This, on the other hand, became a show of suffering, a public lesson for the Queen and a message for those who challenged her. The difference is not only in the presence of the public, but in the political meaning attributed to it. But what happened in other real deliveries? In France, the tradition of giving birth to the court was quite common, although privacy varied according to the Queen and the context. Imagine Maria Antonietta, for example. Her birth was a public show, but other queens could enjoy a little more intimacy, although always with the vigilant look of the court. Prosody, speak. Prosody rate equals 90%. Think about the differences between the customs of the French court and those of other European monarchies. In Spain, for example, although there were also real public births, the degree of public exposure could be different, more controlled, or even more intimate in some cases. The protocol varied considerably. Was there a political intention behind these differences? You would be surprised to know that even in France itself, practices changed over time. What was common in the 17th century was not necessarily in the 18th. The influence of enlightened ideas and social changes influenced the customs of the court, looking for a greater degree of privacy in some cases, although the tradition of the presence of the court remained relevant. Imagine the scene, yourself there, in Versailles. The dense air of expectation, the whispers of the court, the opulence contrasting with the vulnerability of the queen. This ritual, although humiliating for the monarch, became a symbol of power. The presence of the court during childbirth reaffirmed the legitimacy of the heir, a public act that sealed the future of the dynasty. The public childbirth, although brutal for the mother, worked as a demonstration of fertility and capacity for the queen. It was proof of his physical and mental strength, observed by all. His suffering became a narrative that reinforced the image of the monarchy, despite what this meant for his dignity. But this legacy is not limited only to the image of power. Public delivery also left a trace in the history of medicine. The presence of doctors and midwives, although often with questionable practices for the time, documented processes and advances in childbirth care, although at the expense of intimacy and dignity of the queens. Think about the pressure, the constant surveillance to which a woman was subjected to the French court. Its social value was measured, above all, for its ability to give heirs to the throne. They were not individuals with autonomy, but key pieces in the political game with an essentially reproductive role, beyond their personal talents or aspirations. His life revolved around the expectations of the monarchy and society. Even the women of the nobility, with their privileges, were subject to a strict code of conduct, where obedience and submission were essential virtues. His actions were constantly under scrutiny, each movement analyzed and judged. A stained reputation could mean social ostracism, affecting not only them, but also their families and their future possibilities. Marriage, in that context, was not a union based on love, but a strategic alliance to strengthen political ties or ensure succession. You could imagine frustration and lack of control over their own lives that this involved for many women. The role of mother and wife was above any other aspiration or ambition. Imagine the pressure, right? Not only should they give heirs, but every action, every look, every gesture, should contribute to the image of royalty that the court projected to the world. His life was a constant staging, a play where the public was the French nobility and the rest of Europe. Every detail, from his costumes to the slightest facial expression, was carefully calculated to show power, elegance, and, above all, legitimacy. Think of the official portraits, those canvases that were hung in the most important halls. They were not simple images. They were propaganda tools, symbols of power and authority. Each brushstroke, every silk fold in his dress, every jewel that adorned his crown, transmitted a precise message. The monarchy was divine, legitimate, and immovable. Through these images, the very idea of royalty was built and maintained. Even the most intimate ceremonies, such as childbirth, became public shows. It was not just the issue of succession. It was also a demonstration of power, a reaffirmation of the legitimacy of the monarch before his people and before the court. The queen's image giving birth, although humiliating, was still part of the construction of the real image. His suffering became, paradoxically, a symbol of his sacrifice for the kingdom. But the pressure was not limited to the court. Your life, your body, became a show for the people. Childbirth, an intimate act, became a public demonstration of your fertility, a need to ensure the legitimacy of succession. Imagine humiliation. Exposed, vulnerable, before the looks of hundreds of eyes judging every grooves, every drop of sweat. The engravings and paintings of the time do not show you the intimacy of pain, but the staging of the event. They present you as an almost divine figure, but with a forced vulnerability, an image that sought to convey the idea of sacrifice for the kingdom, minimizing the intrinsic humiliation of the act. /prosody, /speak. Speak, prosody rate equals 90%. That carefully built image, however, did not hide the truth. The royal propaganda tried to control the narrative, but the murmuring, the whispers in the halls, the truth filtered among the company ladies, revealed the deep humiliation you suffered. Your body, turned into a political instrument, a merchandise for the perpetuation of the dynasty. Imagine humiliation, total vulnerability exposed to hundreds of looks. That public delivery, more than a biological event, was a deep wound in your soul. Maria Antonietta. The stolen intimacy, trampled dignity left an indelible mark on your psyche. The weight of the real expectation, the constant pressure to produce an heir, became an unbearable load. The constant surveillance, ruthless criticism, the implacable public trial about your body and your maternal capacity, everything contributed to a deep feeling of isolation. You felt observed, judged, and of course, failed. This feeling of failure, amplified by court pressure, slowly undermined your trust and mental health. Years later, the image of that public humiliation, the sensation of extreme vulnerability, were recorded in your memory. That traumatic experience marked you forever, influencing your decisions and your perception of the world. The lack of privacy, the constant exposure, made you a publicly injured figure, unable to find refuge in their own life. But how much of what is told about Maria Antonietta is true? The story is often written from the point of view of the winner, and in your case, dear Maria Antonietta, the narrative has persecuted you for centuries. They painted you as a frivolous queen, wasteful, even traitorous to France. An image that has remained exaggerated and misrepresented over time. That image of extravagant queen, obsessed with fashion and luxuries, is just a part, and perhaps the least precise, of your reality. Your expenses were magnified, your acts of charity and your commitment to art and culture were silenced. You were accused of waste while ignoring the political and economic context of the time. The French Revolution, with its voracious appetite by symbols of opulence, made you the perfect scapegoat. Your image was distorted, becoming the archetype of the carefree queen, outside the suffering of the people. A cruel and reductionist simplification of a complex woman who lived in extraordinarily difficult circumstances. But think about this, what message did the court send by forcing the queen to give birth in public? It was not a sample of affection or celebration, but a demonstration of power. Versailles was a carefully orchestrated scenario, and each act, including the birth of an heir, was subject to a strict protocol that reinforced the image of the absolute monarchy. Your delivery, Maria Antonietta, became a show, a reminder of your subordinate position. They made you a symbol, a piece in a much bigger game. The idea was to show everyone that even the queen, the most powerful woman in the kingdom, was subject to the rules of the court, to the will of the king and the indiscreet look of the nobility. Your intimacy was raped, your body exposed to public sight, turning your experience in something deeply humiliating. Imagine pressure, vulnerability, the absolute helplessness you had to feel. That public delivery was not just a personal humiliation. It was a political act, a demonstration of control and power that served to maintain the existing power structure. It was a clear and brutal message. Even the queen is not exempt from the absolute power of the monarchy. So, think about it. The queen's public humiliation, what impact did it really have in the long term? Not only was it a demonstration of power of the king and the court, but it became a symbol of the control that the monarchy exerted on private life, even about something as intimate as the birth of an heir. A seed of doubt was planted on the legitimacy of the monarchy, a seed that, over time, could germinate in something bigger. Imagine the pressure that this should have represented for future queens. The fear of being judged, to be exposed, to be seen as weak or failed before the relentless gaze of the court. That event became a precedent, a heavyweight in history, a constant reminder of the absolute power of the monarch and the fragility of the queen's position. And you, what do you think? Do you think this event influenced the public perception of the French monarchy? Did you contribute to eroding confidence in the crown? History tells us that the image of absolute power, sometimes, can be a mask that hides deep fragility. This episode is a perfect example of this, a reminder that even kings and queens are human, vulnerable to the weight of history and their own decisions. /prosody /speak. Speak, prosody rate equals 90%. But how do we know all this? Where do we get this detailed information about the humiliation of the queen? The key is in the thorough historical research. To understand the truth behind this event, historians have been based on a wide variety of sources, from private letters and personal newspapers to official documents of the Versailles court. Imagine the amount of information that can be extracted from these documents, written at the time by people who were direct or indirect witnesses of the facts. The memoirs of courtiers, although sometimes biased by their own opinions or interests, offer us valuable perspectives on the political and social climate of the time. Think about the information that can be obtained from someone who was present in the court, or even in the queen's own birth. Their experiences, embodied on paper, help us rebuild the event with greater precision. In addition to primary sources, modern historians have used secondary sources, such as books, academic articles and studies of French history experts of the 17th and 18th century. These academic research analyze, interpret and contextualize the information obtained from primary sources, offering a deeper understanding of the event and its implications. It is a detective work, where each piece of information, however small, contributes to the reconstruction of the historical puzzle. And here we arrive with the history of this queen, a story full of suffering and oppression. I hope you found this narrative as fascinating as I have found it when investigating it. I want to thank you for accompanying me on this trip over time, for your interest in discovering these forgotten stories, often silenced by official history. A special thanks to all historians and academics whose work has been fundamental to rebuild this story. Your rigorous investigations are the basis of our knowledge of the past. I also want to thank all those who have supported me on this channel. Your comments and suggestions are very valuable to me. Remember to subscribe to not miss the next videos, where we will continue to explore fascinating stories of European royalty. Do not forget to activate the bell to receive notifications from new publications. And, of course, share this video with whom you think you may be interested. See you in the next video. I hope you have been interesting. If you liked it, give like and subscribe to more stories of royalty. What do you think about the humiliation suffered by the Queen? Leave it in the comments. /prosody/speak